Good morning, gentlemen. We are back in the classroom here at Mayhew University. Take your seats, get something to write with. We want to jump right into our subject matter. You can ask the man next to you how his weekend was later, but we have a lot of material to cover and not a lot of time. For today's lesson, I want to take two characters from the Bible that had life-changing encounters with Jesus. The first we'll find in the opening of the 5th chapter of the Gospel of John. Now, Jesus finds a lame man at the pool of Bethesda who's waiting for a certain season where an angel will trouble the waters. It is a given that the first man to get into the pool after the angel troubles the waters will be healed, but he can't get himself there, so he seems doomed to remain in this condition. But Jesus steps on the scene, asks if he wants to be made whole, and grants his request. Now, the 10th chapter of Luke's Gospel closes with the story of our second man. Starting in verse 46, we find blind Bartimaeus at the entrance to Jericho being made aware that Jesus was approaching. And he starts shouting, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And the crowd is trying to shut him up, so he just gets louder and louder. Now, Jesus hears him. He calls blind Bartimaeus over. He throws off the coat that he's wearing, and he comes to Jesus, who restores his sight. So do whatever you must to keep those two men in mind, and let's move forward. We live today in a society that just plain expects less from us, man. Well, let's rephrase that a bit. They expect a lot, but they are quick to accept less. And we've moved to a point on this timeline where they will take the flimsiest of excuses for a man who hasn't progressed and will even prepare an excuse for you. Both of our characters had built an identity around their dysfunction, but one chose to walk away from that label. You don't believe me? Well, let's look at our first man. The Bible tells us that for 38 years, he was in this condition, begging alms and waiting for someone else to get him into the pool. Jesus asked him if he wants to be made whole, and you may glaze over that statement to get to the cool miracle part. And I did too, until my pastor pointed out that this man, in 38 years of begging for alms, had not come up with a plan to get into the pool. In that light, the question reads more like this: do you want to be made whole? Think about it. This is the pool of Bethesda. The story tells us of 5 porches where the sick, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed were waiting for the angel to move. And in 38 years, no plan to get someone to get him into the pool. Let me ask you this. Do you want an education? Do you want to own your own business? Do you want to be debt-free? Do you want to own a home? Do you want to lose the weight? Sit with those for a minute, because our second man is about to answer it for you. To understand him, you have to know that in the days of the Roman Empire, if you were able to work but chose not to, it was considered a crime. In fact, at this particular point in history, one of the ways the Roman Empire identified people who couldn't work and essentially had to beg for a living was with a cloak. And this cloak would keep you warm and also let people know that someone in the Roman government had officially deemed you unable to produce for yourself. The cloak served as an actual covering, a label to say, I have whatever, or I am whatever, and it was permission to beg. Society had given him a legitimate excuse not to work. Stepping away from that would have been huge. And when you're begging, the income, the transportation, the shelter, the cell phone, the food, the clothing, these things aren't earned. So removing the cloak required faith that Jesus was going to heal, but also, now hear this, required a willingness to work from that day forward for everything that people had given him before. Men, we want to earn it. It's inside of us. We can't afford to let society build an identity for us around our dysfunctions. And we do have them. The question is, has your dysfunction become a vice? To get to that, you'll have to ask yourself 2 other questions. What's my excuse? And who are my enablers? Society will hand you any label you need to feel good about your mess. You have to fight to decide that the thing that is holding you back, even if it's severe, even if it's a no-kidding giant obstacle, a big rock, you must decide it will not define you. Your dysfunction becomes a vice when you turn to that label as a shield from responsibility. Now think on that for a second. We use vices to escape from reality. A person gets high or gets drunk or abuses prescription pills, does whatever they do to escape the pain. Some vices are different, like self-mutilation or pornography, which is essentially escaping the reality of the intimate relationships that you do have in favor of fantasy. But no matter what, these are vices nonetheless. So let's look at our dysfunction. When you start to be challenged to do something and you point to your situation or your circumstance and you say, I can't because of this, your this, more often than not, is something that can be overcome. So there you sit being challenged, for example, to get up and walk. And you can say, well, I can only walk for 10 minutes because my knee hurts. Well, why does your knee hurt? Well, there's too much weight on it. Okay, well, then let's try to work out. Well, I can't work out because my knee hurts. Okay, well, there's other ways to lose weight. No, my doctor says I can't do anything. I'm disabled. There's my label. Did you tell your doctor that you really want to lose the weight? Because if you had told your doctor that you really want to lose the weight, no doctor worth their medical license would have told you there's no way. Take off the cloak, put down the fork, lose the weight to relieve the pressure off the knees so you can eventually walk for longer than 10 minutes. But until you can, while you're putting down the fork, go for the dadgum 10-minute walk. Don't sit there in the prime of your life wanting to take the easy way out and allowing your dysfunction to become a vice. You never have to face reality when you have a label. One day, you're going to want something more. You're not going to be able to just up and make a change in your 40s or 50s the same way you could right now. Maybe you had a traumatic experience, and we talked about this towards the end of 401. You can't stay in the victim mindset. You can't turn your label into a drug that you take every time someone scares you with having to actually make something of yourself or do something with your life. Come on, let's just be honest. Can we be honest with each other today, men? Just a little bit. That's what we're supposed to be doing here as we grow, right? When someone challenges you with something seemingly trivial, right? Like why you haven't registered for classes or gotten any exercise in this month, or why you haven't visited your son on your scheduled weekend in forever, or why you haven't been promoted on your job yet. Can't we just get past using our label as the excuse? If you're not careful, you will build a lifestyle around the label. And instead of challenging it head on, you create an entire system around what you were meant to overcome. And the saddest part about that, now listen to me about this, the saddest part about that is it takes more work to prop up that system than it does to simply work through it. Now, who are the enablers in your life that are affirming your labels? They've got to go. You heard me. They either change their tune, you tune them out, or they have to go. If no one in your circle is pushing against the dysfunction, how are you going to grow? You've got to change your circle until the number of people who won't accept excuses outnumbers the people who will. Or you just may spend 38 years as what someone else says you are. It is tempting to accept the label. There are support groups for everything these days, and we can definitely gain strength from all that bonding. But here's the thing, if we're not careful, we can take a look at the fact that everyone has a support group, everyone's got a label. We can focus on the fact that by accepting the label, these folks have been alleviated or rather unburdened from responsibility, and that's when the label becomes a vice. It's time to get your money right. Let's just inject a little childhood poverty into your veins. You just put your hands on a woman. Let's take a hit of I didn't have a father. You just lost your temper at work. Let's light up the abuse pipe. You're heading to jail for the 5th time. We'll just pop a few bad examples growing up pills. You dropped out of school. Let's take a few shots of minority. Reject the people giving you permission to be less. These are your enablers. Every time you fall short, they have a ready-made excuse built for you instead of holding you accountable. There is a destiny that you're forfeiting by accepting the endorphins you get from holding up your label and saying, I can't, when in reality, you won't. Bartimaeus is the model. He had faith that Jesus would heal him. And getting sight back late in life may have initially been a pay cut for him, but in the story you can almost feel his passion. Get this label off me. I'm getting my sight back and I am working for mine. So, what label are you ready to put down today? What drug are you willing to stop taking to escape from the reality that you may not be the cause of your problem, but you are the solution? This week, let's check into excuse rehab and walk out stronger and better. Thank you for joining us today, men. I will see you next time. God bless you all.